The Great Lakes have long been a liquid highway which has transported cargoes and people into and out of the interior of the American continent, and were key to building and populating this region. As technology developed through the 19th century, the vessels who plied these waters advanced from sail to steam. During the last half of the century, literally, thousands of sail and steam-powered vessels traveled the freshwater seas, touching points along its coasts. These journeys were not without their dangers, though. One coast along the southern shore of the most remote Great Lake, Lake Superior, is well known for these dangers, with many ships and souls being lost. Losses were due to storms, ice, collisions, and fire. Navigational aids and life-saving stations were funded and built. Many of the passengers were immigrants who were looking for a better life by populating the frontier towns. Bulk cargoes such as iron ore, grain, coal, lumber, copper, pig iron constituted most of the goods shipped, accompanied by general merchandise to support the logging and mining communities. Quite often, when we think of shipwrecks, we think of treasure, such as Spanish galleons carrying gold, silver, and precious stones. This is not the case, however, in the Great Lakes, because these precious metals and stones are not in abundance there. Therefore, treasure ships in Lake Superior are extremely rare. There is one ship that has come to grief in Superior that was a treasure ship. One August evening, the Propeller Comet had just passed the relatively new lighthouse at Whitefish Point and was heading downbound towards Sault Ste. Marie with a cargo of high-grade Montana silver ore, bales of wool from Montana, and pig iron from the Upper Peninsula. As another upbound ship approached them, Captain Duga adjusted his course based on the navigational lights he was seeing on the upbound vessel to avoid a potential collision. Shortly after that, vessel appeared to turn again, prompting a course correction on the Comet, but it was too late. The upbound Sidewheeler steamer Manitoba struck the port bow of the Comet at full speed about 20 feet aft of her port bow, crushing or trapping some of the crew. Chaos ensued as the crew quickly realized that the Comet was sinking and couldn't be saved. They tried to save their lives by climbing onto the Manitoba, but not all made it. This horrific scene was witnessed by the crew and passengers of the Manitoba, including the Anglican Bishop of Musoni, who was holding a religious service when the collision occurred. He was so affected by what he saw that he noted later in his memoirs that it was life-changing and made him realize how fleeting life can be, and it energized him to continue his missionary work and spread the word to the remote regions of North America. In 1857, Dean Richmond, who held an executive position on the New York Central Railroad, commissioned the building of two sister ships, the Comet and the Rocket, by Peck and Masters of Cleveland, Ohio. The ships were 181 feet long, 29 feet in beam, and 12 feet in depth, and had a direct-acting vertical engine with a propeller for propulsion. They were immediately put on the Buffalo to Green Bay route and connected with the railroad spurs to transport cargo. In 1859, it was determined that it would be better for business to add upper-deck passenger cabins to accommodate travelers so it would connect with the rail line, promoting more revenue. The Comet had several owners throughout its life, with Buffalo to Green Bay being a primary route, eventually expanding into Lake Superior ports. She carried a mixture of cargoes on most of her runs, with everything from flour to fencing and barrel hoops to bulk cargo, along with passengers. The Comet was involved in several mishaps over her career, with some more serious than others. On May 31, 1865, she was driven on a reef off of Port Washington, Wisconsin. She was scuttled in 18 feet of water to avoid being pounded to pieces, and later raised and rebuilt in Milwaukee. On August 13th, she was in a collision with the Canadian steamer Silver Spray off Port Huron, with minor damage to the Comet. A little over 2 months later, she had a collision with the Propeller Hunter near Fighting Island, 8 miles below Detroit. signals were confused and both sunk but were later raised. The Comet was carrying 15,000 bushels of wheat, 1,630 barrels of flour, and 750 sacks of feed. August 19, 1871, found the Comet in another collision, this time with the scow Maria in the St. Clair River. The Comet was sold to Hanna and Company in 1873, and that winter she had a significant rebuild, completing 11 round trips to Lake Superior in 1874. Although the Comet was one of the first ships to open navigation in the 1875 season, shipping demand would quickly fall off due to the continuing effects of the Panic of 1873, which was the first Great Depression in the United States. Lack of shipping demand idled the Comet for most of June, July, and until the middle of August, when it was finally contracted to take a load of coal from Ashtabula, Ohio, to Duluth, Minnesota. She left her layup in the river at Cleveland and headed for Ashtabula, loaded 550 tons of coal, and headed for Duluth on August 13th. Once the Comet reached Duluth, she prepared for her return voyage to Buffalo. So where did the large amount of silver ore come from? As previously mentioned, the transportation of true treasure by ship is rare in the Great Lakes. Although a vein of silver was discovered at Silver Islet, Ontario, north of Duluth in 1868, this significant shipment of silver ore was not from there. It was from Montana, as was the wool. So, how did the silver ore and wool make it from Montana all the way to Duluth for shipment, and where was the silver ore being shipped? The journey started in the Helena, Montana area where the ore was mined. Gold was initially discovered near Deer Lodge in the 1850s. A major strike of gold and silver was then discovered near Bannock in 1862, kicking off the age of mining in Montana. The challenge was how to ship the bulk ore from the frontier back east. Over the past decade or more, railroad companies had been pushing to expand railroad routes, and there was a significant effort to connect to the West Coast across the northern states. However, one consequence of the Panic of 1873 was that many U.S. railroad companies were over-leveraged with loans in Europe. When the Depression hit Europe, many European entities who held these loans called them in, bankrupting or severely hindering the expansion of railroad companies in the United States. One railroad company, the Northern Pacific Railway, had pushed west as far as Bismarck in the Dakota Territory in 1875, but stalled out there due to the financial crash. The Bismarck railhead was over 400 miles from the mines in the Helena area, so getting 70 tons of silver ore over the plains to Bismarck was a daunting task. One route was to transport it by boat down the treacherous Missouri River. Another alternative was to haul it in large freight wagons pulled by a team of horses on rough wagon trails through hostile Sioux territory, an area that passed right by the Little Big Horn where Custer met his demise in 1876, a year after the Comet's loss. Most likely the Comet's cargo was transported by wagon train, not via the Missouri River, because that was the more established route at the time. Once wagons reached the railhead at Bismarck, they were loaded onto a Northern Pacific Railroad train heading east to the Twin Cities area, where it proceeded northward to Duluth on the Lake Superior and Mississippi Railway. The tracks came right down to the docks where the ore, which was packed into 100-pound burlap bags, were loaded on the Comet along with 54 bales of Montana wool. The shipper of the silver ore was the First National Bank, whose representative, A.M. Essler, had been busy for some time buying ore from different mines to make up the 70-ton shipment. It was destined for Buffalo, there to be unloaded and transported further by train to the Mint in Philadelphia to be made into coins. 54 bales of Montana wool were also loaded into the hold. 10,000 pounds of wool was shipped by the Cook brothers, and 3,000 pounds by John Potter, both of Camp Baker, Montana. Sheep were originally brought into Montana as a food source for the miners because of their ability to survive the rough environment, and wool eventually became a revenue source for them as well. The Comet, with Captain Duga in command, cleared Duluth, Minnesota on August 23, 1875, with her load of silver ore and wool, but no passengers, heading for Munising, Michigan, to pick up a load of pig iron. Iron ore mined in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan was smelted at the Schoolcraft Blast Furnace, located on Munising Creek, and the Bay Furnace across the bay. They were called pigs because they looked like suckling pigs lined up when being cast. The shape also made it easier for them to be handled and transported. The pigs were then sent to foundries in the lower lakes to be made into railroad rails and railroad engines. The Panic of 1873 had set in, though, and by 1875, with the slow down of railroad expansion, pig iron demand was starting to wane. Once loaded, the Comet set her course east for Whitefish Point and ultimately Sault Ste. Marie. The weather was fair and the voyage uneventful as she traversed the shipwrecked coast where many ships had been lost in the preceding years. She arrived at Whitefish Point around 8 o'clock the evening of August 26th, as a dark but clear night descended upon them. Using the lighthouse on Whitefish Point as a reference, Captain Duga ordered a turn to the starboard, setting their course for Point Iroquois and the entrance to the St. Mary's River in preparation to go through the Sioux Locks. Captain Duga had been on deck for about half an hour, but left for about 5 minutes, leaving the second mate in charge. Upon his return, they noticed an upbound ship approaching them. Both ships had all their lights burning, and according to Captain Duga, they could only see the port side red light on the oncoming ship. He ordered the wheelsmen to put the helm over half a point to give them a little more space for a port-to-port passing. As they progressed further at 10 miles per hour, he ordered the helm be put over another half a point and exclaimed to the mate, "Where in the hell is that chap going?" He then gave one whistle blast, again signaling for a port-to-port passing. He claimed no response was given by the other vessel, and then its starboard green light came into view, making a collision a real possibility. The captain shouted for the vessel to take her own side even though they couldn't hear him. The second mate of the Comet then signaled the engine room to stop, the engine hoping to avoid the inevitable, but they were too late. The Canadian sidewheel steamer Manitoba sliced into the port side of the Comet at cruising speed about 20 feet behind her bow, cutting a gash about 16 feet deep into her hull. Aboard the Manitoba, the first mate was in charge. Just before the collision, Captain Bowie Symes came out on deck and, noticing the proximity of the two vessels, rushed to the pilot house but didn't make it there in time to give any commands before the ships struck each other. The collision was so violent and abrupt that the wheelsman was thrown over the wheel. Down in the salon, the Bishop of Musoni, John Horden, and a Methodist Reverend, Mr. Dixon of Sarnia, were preparing the evening religious service. All the passengers, about 50 in number, were thrown from their chairs prostrate on the floor, and lamps were even put out due to the force of the concussion. Luckily, there were no serious injuries. According to a passenger on the Manitoba, they sighted the Comet coming toward them from the north-northwest, showing her green or starboard light. The passenger stated that he did not hear either ship whistle, and suddenly when they were close, the Comet shifted her course, shutting out her green light and showing her red light and exposing her port side. Chaos then ensued. Although the passenger claimed the lady passenger stayed calm and merely asked if there was any danger, the Manitoba's cook leaped on the Comet thinking that his ship was sinking, but realized the reverse was true and quickly jumped back on the Manitoba. There were 2 men sleeping in the forecastle area of the Comet and were either crushed or so badly injured in the collision that they could not escape and went down with the ship. The Comet sank in only a few minutes, loaded down with its heavy cargo of silver ore and pig iron. One man was sucked down in the vortex, and another tried to jump on the Manitoba, falling short and hanging onto the sash of a window before exclaiming, "Oh Lord God, I'm gone!" Then he fell in the water and disappeared beneath the surface. First Mate Gore was sleeping in his berth when he was awakened by the crash. He rushed to the pilot house and looked over the side of the ship and saw it was settling fast. He shouted, "Come on, Captain, she is gone." Captain Duga replied, "Make sure of it before you go." The Comet had settled about 6 feet when the captain tried to get on the Manitoba. He couldn't reach the fender to climb up, so First Mate Gore climbed over the rail and grasped his hand and pulled him up, saving his life. As the ship plunged to the bottom, the cabins were ripped from the deck and disintegrated, leaving nothing but swirling water and debris. Captain Symes of the Manitoba ordered his lifeboats lowered and was able to save 4 of the Comet's crew members. Once everyone was rescued that could be rescued, the Manitoba assessed her damage, and finding that the leaking could be controlled, she limped back to the Sioux. The aftermath of the Comet tragedy took its toll on human life, loss of property, and legal clashes. Half of the crew of the Comet lost their lives. Those involved in the accident were traumatized, and with some, it affected the course of their lives. Once the Manitoba arrived in the Sioux after the accident, the Comet's crew were transferred to the steamer Quebec, who transported them to Port Huron, Michigan, arriving on August 29th. Initially, just the names of the known survivors were given, and the owners of the Comet were chastised by Chicago's Inter-Ocean newspaper for not reporting the lost crew members. To be fair, at that point in time, all the crew members' names were not necessarily known on a vessel because some crew would move from ship to ship. Also, all of the ship's papers were lost, which could have held those names. One person who really took the tragedy to heart was the Bishop of Musoni himself. In his book, 42 Years Amongst the Indians and Eskimos, he was quoted as saying the following on January 6, 1876, a little over 4 months after the accident.
During the whole of that time, I have not been laid up with any serious illness whatever, and I am thankful to add that I still feel as strong in body and as capable of work as when I first landed here. Truly, God has surrounded me with loving kindness and tender mercy, but in the course of last year he taught me, in a manner not to be misunderstood, that the threads of my life are held in his hand, for he plucked me from the very jaws of death. With a large number of fellow passengers, I was on board the steamship Manitoba on Lake Superior, on my way to Michipecoton, when late in the evening we came into collision with the American steamship the Comet, a vessel more than twice the size of our own, laden with a heavy cargo, silver ore, and pig iron. That we escaped without material injury seemed quite miraculous, for the Comet sank immediately, and with her, I am grieved to add 11 of her crew of 21 men. I trust that this nearness to death, showing me how uncertain is life, is causing me to value it more highly and to labor more earnestly in the vineyard before the night cometh, in which no man can work.
After experiencing the horrific loss of life that Bishop Horden witnessed, it caused him to rededicate his life to spreading the word to the remote regions of the wilderness, realizing how fragile life can be and that we are not promised tomorrow. It is hard to glean any positive effect out of this tragedy, but one could argue that this is a powerful example. Shortly after the incident, the Comet's owners libeled the owners of the Manitoba for its losses. Often, we don't know how these suits play out in the courts, but in this case, we do. The suit proceeded through circuit court in 1884, and with appeals, it eventually made it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1887, 12 years after the initial filing. Judge Baxter in the circuit court found that both parties were at fault and should split the losses equally between them due to not slackening speed and signaling their passing intentions early on before a collision was inevitable. This decision was ultimately held up in the U.S. Supreme Court by Justice Blatchford, ordering the concerned parties to split the losses. Only 11 days after the disaster, an article was published in a Buffalo newspaper claiming that there were negotiations going on between the underwriters of the Comet's insurers and the Coast Wrecking Company to salvage the ship and its silver ore, claiming that the ship was only in 21 fathoms of water. 3 days later, a rebuttal was published in a Chicago newspaper, and in it, Captain Merriman of the Coast Wrecking Company denied that they will attempt the raising of the Propeller Comet. The vessel, it is learned, is at too great a depth for any diver to work. The ship was actually in 38 fathoms of water, well beyond diving technology at the time. Reportedly, another attempt to salvage the Comet was mounted in 1938, but the ship couldn't be located. The Comet remained undisturbed and unseen until June 6, 1980, when its location was discovered by Tom Farnquist and Robert Nichols of the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society using the 40-foot research vessel Antiquarian equipped with side-scan sonar technology. The ship was dove heavily in the 1980s and was a deep, dark, and dangerous dive. Most dives were made on open-circuit air systems. Nitrogen narcosis and hypothermia was a real issue and made it difficult to operate at a depth of 200 to 230 feet. The identity of the wreck was confirmed based on the location, design of the vessel, cargo, and most notably the name Comet painted on the side of the engine cylinder. The Comet was incorporated into the Whitefish Point underwater preserve in 1987, highlighting the growing movement to preserve the historical shipwrecks in the area. In 2004, a grant was applied for and given to the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society by the Michigan Department of Transportation and was administered by the Chippewa County Road Commission to document 5 shipwrecks within the preserve as they lay on the bottom. The main objective of this 4-year project was to document and assess the vessel's condition, orientation, and artifact location within each wreck site. Data collected includes hundreds of precise measurements, high-resolution digital side-scan sonar images, 35mm still photos, and many hours of video imagery on each site. The information was then used to create accurate illustrations, detailed site maps, and paintings of each ship as it once sailed and as it appeared on the bottom at that time. Collectively, the archaeological data produced during this project served as a historical benchmark and a tool to be used to monitor, manage, and hopefully mitigate the impact recreational divers, time, and nature may have on these non-renewable underwater cultural resources. A talented team of experts was assembled by the project director, Tom Farnquist. They included C. Patrick LeBeatty, who was named principal investigator, talented artists such as Ken Marshall and Robert McGreevy, and a host of technical divers and support crew. Dr. John Halsey represented the Michigan office of the state archaeologist. Hundreds of measurements were meticulously taken by having divers stretch tapes between identifiable structures on the ship to determine size and relative position to other structures so that accurate line drawings and paintings could be made. An ROV was then used to confirm the measurement, which was relayed to the artists in real time, enabling them to create realistic artwork. This meticulous process took coordination of effort both above and below the water and days of dedicated work, clearly a significant accomplishment and a benchmark for the time. The team found that the ship went down bow first, hitting so hard that it pushed the stem post back significantly into the hull, pushing up mounds of clay and destroying much of the bow, but the hogging arches were still standing. Many unique artifacts were found, including the whistle that supposedly signaled for a port-to-port passing, the running light that the Manitoba saw before the collision. The ship's compass used to make the course corrections. Dishes that were used in the salon to feed the passengers and crew. Silver ore scattered all over the interior of the hull. Pigs of iron. Remnants of the wool bales. The depth marking on the rudder. A crewman's boots. One of the most iconic features that also positively identifies the wreck as the Comet is its name painted on the engine cylinder. One item found sparked significant interest: the ship's safe. It probably contained the ship's papers, which were not recovered before the ship went down, and possibly a small sum of money to pay the crew. Whatever is in the safe has not been determined, and it further fuels the fantasy of treasure. One of the significant outputs of the project is a 32-page colored booklet illustrating the ships both above and below the surface, line drawings, pictures of artifacts, and stories of the tragedies. The booklet provides a tool to educate the public about the important role of ships in transportation and the development of the country's frontier. In the following years after the Michigan Department of Transportation project, technology and photographic techniques continued to evolve and improve. In 2022, the Great Lakes Shipwreck Preservation Society created a photogrammetry model of the Comet using 5,220 high-resolution photos. Divers used underwater scooters with cameras mounted on them to cover the whole wreck site, as well as swimming through the interior where the scooters could not go. Specialized software was used to build a 3D model that users could rotate and examine from any perspective, making the experience highly immersive. Finally, the entire wreck site could be mapped within hours, rather than spending days or months on demanding work, and be viewed in its entirety. This will be an invaluable tool going forward to document shipwreck sites and track their condition over time. The Comet wreck site offers key insights into how Great Lakes shipping helped to shape the American frontier. We observed its effects on, and adaptations to, fluctuations in the economy. Shipping freight and transporting passengers in 1875 was complex and risky, yet progress persisted until the coast-to-coast link was established. Many Great Lakes sailors relied on their skill and a good bit of luck and superstition to avoid disaster. Their superstitious nature became evident in the wreckage of the Comet when a horseshoe was found nailed on a post in the bow area near where the collision occurred. Some theorists believe that the ends of the shoe should point up to collect the luck, while others believe they should be pointed down so it will shower luck on everyone who passes underneath it. Did the builders make the wrong choice? While the treasure of silver ore is a key draw in the comet's story, her real value may lie in the history and stories she holds for those willing to uncover it.